And we are live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of A Case of the Mondays, the Salty Nerd Podcast Monday night live stream where we talk with interesting people about interesting things. And before we get super deep into our awesome guests that we have tonight, I just want to remind everybody, if you like what we do here, if you love our channel, our movie breakdowns, our reviews, and all that kind of stuff, become a club member and you'll get even more of it in spades. It's the raw, unfiltered us. It's everything we have to say. We don't have to worry about whether or not we're going to be taken down off of YouTube or Apple or Spotify or anything like that. This is where you guys are going to get the goods. Join the membership. You're going to get 4 exclusive episodes every single month on top of a ton of other content where we're doing behind the scenes photos or live streams. You also get exclusive only, members only Discord access, all kinds of really fun stuff. And come join the fantastic community that we already have established, and the 2 years plus of backlog members-only content where you can go back and see how we began and just watch us progress as we've made the podcast evolve and we've improved things. So consider joining the club. We'd really appreciate the support, and you guys get a lot of awesome stuff in return. All right, that is enough of my spiel. Today, my guest is my good friend, producer, science fiction author, Matthew Kadish. Welcome, sir. How are you doing tonight?
I am so honored to be on a live stream with the Salty Nerd. This is like the highlight of my career.
It's not like you spend every waking day thinking about me.
You know what's funny, Alex, is we actually in the chat for the home gang and for my bad writing live stream, they're always asking like, how come Alex is not on the live streams? Have you usurped the Salty Nerd? And
no way.
We have to keep telling people like, look, Alex is working. He's got a day job.
Yeah.
So we haven't kidnapped Alex or usurped his channel. He's just very busy nerd.
Yeah, I have a day job. I homeschool my kids, and then on my days off, I do this kind of stuff. And I help edit the podcast, and then we're making our own content. It is my second job. Hopefully, it will be my only job. I have people rooting for me on that one, so I'm happy about that. But so tonight, guys, if you're in the chat, feel free to ask questions. This is going to be a real low-key, very casual chat. So if you want to pop in the comments, and we'll answer whatever questions you have about our podcast or about podcasting in general, how we got started, where you can start if you're interested. So feel free to hop in there.
One of the funny things, Alex, is that we mentioned this is like your second job, and the boss of your first job wants to help you make your second job your only job.
Yeah,
that was a funny story.
Yeah, so my coworkers that I work with, we work long hours. We're 12-hour shifts, and we're usually in a large piece of equipment all day long. We get like a half an hour for break. So we're in our cab. We have Bluetooth speakers. It's like they're like driving big, giant house-sized Cadillacs. But the thing that we always do as operators is like we have something playing, whether it's a music or a podcast or something. We're all big-time podcasters. And when word started getting around that I have my own podcast, people were very, very interested because they were like, oh, I need more content to listen to. I've got 12 hours to fill, so I want to listen to something entertaining. And I started telling people I'm kind of shy about it. Like there's this weird thing where like two worlds collide, right? Like my normal day job life, my, being a father, being a husband, like that's that world. And then me being a goofy nerd talking about Marvel and Star Wars and stuff like that. That's like two separate things. So when they kind of collide once in a while, it makes me feel a little bit awkward. So I don't preach it from the mountaintops that I do my own thing. But people started asking me, and I was like, yeah, I have this thing here. You can look it up. It's on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to stuff. And they'd start listening to it. So word got around. And on one of my days off, my boss gave me a call. And I'm like, well, that's weird. So I picked up the phone. I'm like, hey, man, what's going on? Everything all right? He's like, hey, I'm listening to this podcast. And it's the Salty Nerd Podcast. Have you ever heard of it? And I'm like, yeah, that's me. He's like, yeah, that's you, huh? And I'm like, yeah, it is. He's like, how long have you been doing this for? God, man, it's got to be close to 2 years or so. I'm like, he's like, bro, this is really professional, high quality stuff you're doing. It's freaking hilarious. He's like, I don't even watch these shows that you're talking about, and I'm so entertained with listening to you guys talking about them. It's amazing. I had no idea you did something like this. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of my thing I have on the side that I'm hoping is gonna, be able to get me away from this job. And he's like, can I be one of your sponsors? So he was like very impressed with the quality of the podcast and our banter between me, you, Vader, and Jude. Like he was blown away by it, which was really cool and also kind of weirded me out a little bit. But ever since he found out about it, it's funny. He's been like real buddy with me now. He's like talking about, so what's it like making these content? Like, man, you could blow up any day now. You could be making tons of money. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what we're working towards. So he's like very on board with me leaving that job and doing my own thing. It's like if you do that, I would be so proud of you, so jealous. I wish I could do something like that. So it's pretty cool. It's a nice feeling, and it kind of made me bond a little bit with my boss. So that was kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, I'm very proud of this podcast. I love doing it. I love working with you and Vader and Jude. It's if it could be my full-time thing, it would be a dream.
Well, you know what's funny about that story, I think we've joked about this in the past, the professionalism of the podcast. So when we first started, we weren't very professional. Like it was just kind of like a bunch of friends getting together, recording themselves talking. And when we decided to take this show seriously, I kind of sat down with you guys and I'm like, hey, here's the level of professionalism I'm used to.
Yeah. And
I had to drag you guys kicking and screaming to that standard of professionalism that I required. And you guys still give me a hard time about it. But, you know, there's something to be said about having like a good sounding podcast and a professional looking podcast. Like we're not just a bunch of talking heads. We have a multi-camera setup, and that gives us a certain level of uniqueness and professionalism. And like we're almost like a TV show or a radio show, you know?
Yeah.
And there's this, where was I going with this? In terms of like the professional aspect of the podcast, to me, that's what separates the men from the boys. That's what separates the people with like 2 million subscribers versus the people with like 100. And when it came to talking about the movies, you know, there's always this kind of, what do you call it? Like impulse to just jump in and start talking about stuff you've already seen, and assuming that because the people you're talking to have already seen it, they know what you're talking about. But remember, like when we first started this, I was like, guys, let's back up. Let's do the synopsis. Let's tell people what the movie's about. And you guys are like, oh, you're ruining the flow of the conversation.
Killing the vibes, man.
Yeah. And yet it's important that people who haven't seen these movies or maybe saw them a long time ago and don't remember them know what we're talking about. So I'd always have to kind of like put the brakes on stuff and be like, okay, here's what the movie's about. And you guys just sit there and like, oh, Kadish is doing his professor thing. And then, you know, once I was done, then we started doing like the regular show. And it was for people like your boss who hadn't ever seen those things that I hammered that we had to do that.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, if you think about long-term stuff, if there's someone like a year from now who wants to go back through our catalog and like listen to us, they don't want to have seen the movies that we're talking about to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of podcasters forget about, is like when they're talking about stuff, they just assume that the people that
listening have already seen it. Yeah. I think we did breakdowns of The Boys from Amazon, and one of the comments from one of our patrons actually was like, I think it was Nick. He said, I won't watch this show because it's like too gory for me. It's not really my thing. I'm not into it. But because you guys break it down the way you do, I feel like I've seen it, and I know the references that you're making later on when the season, you know, references something back, because I've heard such detailed recountings of the episode that I feel like I watched it with you, even though I haven't actually seen the show. So that, like, yes, we were kicking and screaming, because for me, from my point of view and the way my brain works, being a consumer of content, I like that easygoing flow that kind of just feeds off of each member of the crew, where if we stop and we go, okay, let me just kind of mention things for about 5-10 minutes, it when you're listening to it, it kind of like puts the brakes on a little bit, and it kind of takes you out of the element, and then you kind of like, you know, you get not confused, but you just kind of get lost in the conversation. You stop listening for a little bit, and then once the banter starts picking up, you start checking back in. So for me, like I'm I understand exactly where you were coming from, and I knew you were right, but I wanted there to be.
You hated to admit it.
I always hate to admit you're right, but I wanted there to be a different way that we could do it so that it would like kind of feed into the banter that we have. And that's where I think Jude freaking shines. Her synopsises, they're not only like they tell you what the movie's about and they give you an idea of the plot and this and that, but they're freaking hilarious. And I think that that element of the pod where Jude really shines is like bringing that professor style that you like, being educational, for people who are listening, but also having a ton of fun doing it. We got a couple comments in the chat real quick.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, before we get to the comments, a big thing that really shined in terms of like people not watching the show, but listening to our recaps because the show was bad, was the Falcon Winter Soldier recaps that we did. Like when we were doing that, we had a lot of comments. It's like, I hate this show. I'm not watching it, but I love listening to you guys talk about it. And the same thing goes for bad movies. So like the worst stuff that we watch and recap, the more people enjoy it because they don't actually have to watch the bad stuff. They can just enjoy the good stuff from us. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So Gasso, he's a patron of the podcast. He says the camera switching is on point. That is true. Kadish is not only extremely intelligent when it comes to like writing and how good movies do what they do, but he has a little like keyboard type thing in front of him that controls the cameras for our podcast. And if you watch our videos or our clips or whatever, he'll be bouncing between 4 people, all reacting and all having a conversation. Like within seconds of somebody saying something, he's on the next person's reaction. And he like catches those really funny moments that adds to the podcast. I don't know how he does it. I watch him sometimes in the corner of my eye. I'll see him and he's just like flipping away with the cameras. It's amazing. It's amazing work. And it makes you think like, wow, did you have 4 channels and you just edited the reactions? Like, no, that's this guy right here live switching it while we're talking.
So our video switcher, we use an ATEM Blackmagic Mini, and they actually have versions that record all the video on separate channels, right? So each camera has its own video file, and what you can do is you can import that into like an editing software and edit between all the different camera angles so that you can get really precise cuts. We don't do that. I would probably go insane having to go through and do all that editing. So basically we're switching cameras live. And one of the reasons why we only got on YouTube this year, because we started the podcast in 2019 and started doing it kind of like somewhat professionally in 2020, was that it took me a really long time to figure out how to get a 4-camera setup that wasn't going to cost like $15,000. And while we're doing the show, I not only have to be engaged in the conversation, thinking about what I'm going to say, but I also have to be aware of who's speaking, where the camera is best suited. Like we just released a video to the patrons that is going to be coming out later this week, doing dad jokes. It was the dad joke challenge, where you and Vader would read each other dad jokes and you try not to laugh. And one of the choices I made on that video while we were shooting is to keep cutting to Jude's reaction, because you guys were stone-faced through a lot of those things, but Jude was like cracking up. So I had to like cut to her, and it was funnier watching her react to the jokes than it was listening to you guys read them.
She broke me because I was like, I had my eyes on Vader and I could have held it together, but Jude was laughing so hard that it was in turn making me laugh. So the video, I think it's when it's going to be out this weekend, right?
I think this Thursday.
This Thursday? Okay, guys, check it out. If you're in the chat right now, make sure you're like and subscribe to the channel.
I think it comes out this Thursday for patrons. And
okay. Oh, that's right. It's an early patron. Okay, yeah. Early access is for patrons. So if you guys want to jump in and get in the early access, go to saltynerdclub.com and jump in. And then it'll be released to public later on. But it's a hilarious video, and I can't wait for everybody to watch it. Okay, so we got another comment here who got caught by the clickbait title. I don't know about you guys, but while Tolkien's world and story are great, his writing is pretty ass. That's some salt there, Mr. Kadish. Where do you
actually
fall?
Agree with that?
Do you? I was gonna say,
I've never been a fan of Tolkien's prose.
Okay,
like he was a brilliant storyteller, but like I'm kind of more in the J.R.R. Martin school of writing. Like I really like Martin's style. And I've never been able to finish Tolkien because it's very slow. He writes a lot of songs in his books. So I get bored reading them. And the movies were just way cooler. I'm sorry. That's one of those situations where the adaptation, I feel, was better than the source material.
It was definitely more digestible for the broader audience. But I've read, or I guess I can't say that. I've listened to all of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy and also The Hobbit and stuff like that on audible.com. And luckily they found a narrator who is very animated. He makes sure he does all the really cool voices. And even those songs that are like kind of like really overly long and you're listening to him, he actually sings them fairly well. And so it kind of sells the atmosphere a little bit. It's a little bit more immersive than if you were just to sit and reading it in your own voice.
I feel like Shakespeare is a lot like that, where if you read Shakespeare, it's very boring. But if you listen to it or watch it, it's very engaging. And you have to remember that a lot of Shakespeare stuff was meant to be performed.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know this, Alex, I used to work in Hollywood.
No way.
Yeah. It's not a very well-known fact about me. But they used to have these things for writers where like actors would get together at a theater and they would say, hey, writers, bring your screenplay. We'll read it out loud and you can hear what your stuff would sound like, to like actors and stuff like that. And I used to go to that event and just sit there and listen to, the screenplays that were read by all these actors. And listening to stuff read out loud highlights every mistake and flaw that you could possibly hope to avoid. Mm-hmm. And it was so cringeworthy that I couldn't go more than 3 times because it got to the point where it was like, oh, this is so bad, I can't take it anymore.
That's interesting. So this is an interesting comment because I actually sounds familiar from another writer that I read. It says, like Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series, the story is interesting. The characters are interesting. 3 pages describing, I don't know how to say that word, clothing or Matt's gambling is pretty bad. So that reminds me a lot of Tom Clancy. I love Tom Clancy's books, but my God, he will describe a pencil for 2 freaking chapters before telling you how that guy murders that person with a pencil. It's a little bit absurd, but it's just a style of writing that I think some people like and some people don't. It's an interesting way of doing it.
What's even worse with Robert Jordan is like after about the 3rd book in the series, all of his books slow to a crawl, and it's just wall-to-wall description. It's been like 3 pages talking about someone's ponytail. I could never get into Robert Jordan's work, just like I couldn't get into Tolkien's. I like the ideas that he came up with. I can appreciate the world building he did. He was kind of the forerunner of high fantasy after Tolkien. If it weren't for him, we would have never gotten the Game of Thrones books.
Yeah,
because he paved the way for George R.R. Martin to do his thing. So I have an appreciation of the Wheel of Time, but I've never been a big fan of it, simply because I didn't like the writing style.
Okay, so this is what I was going to ask you, because I actually, believe it or not, Kadish, I read your books. And I just finished, not too long ago, the Lawman, Rook, and Berenger book. And it's got to be one of my favorite sci-fi novels that I've read recently. It's very immersive. It's very digestible, and the characters stand out. How do you go about planning this out? Do you have a whiteboard of like, these are the events that are going to happen, and you kind of like tie it together? Where does the process start for you?
So the process starts with a 1-sentence idea. So for Rook and Berenger, I wanted to make it like a space cop series, like Lethal Weapon meets Firefly type thing.
Yep.
And so I sat down and I was like, okay, what are all the stories I want to tell with these 2 characters? And so I wrote out like 12 to 24 1-sentence ideas. And then I ordered them in the most interesting to me to the least interesting. And I usually cut like the bottom half of that stuff. So I've got 12 stories that I really want to tell with these guys. And so I kind of latched onto the first idea, which was that 1-sentence thing. Mm-hmm. And I sit down, and what I do is I'm an outliner. To me, having a well-planned story is of utmost importance, not just to me as a writer, because it makes it easier to write, but to an audience, because an audience wants to feel like there's a plan. It's kind of like that Joker thing. It's like, it's all according to plan.
Yep.
So when it comes to that, I basically have a little bit of a formula that I follow. So I'm like, I have my beginning, I have my ending, and then I have my midpoint. And I know what happens at each one of those points. And then I have like a 10% point and a climax point, and then I fill that in. And then everything else in between, I'm like, okay, how do I get from this point to that point? And then I'll just sit there and I'll brainstorm and I'll write up stuff and I'll get rid of the stuff I don't like, and then I'll put in the stuff I do like until I have a full outline. And typically it starts with the end and you work backwards to figure out how you get there. And then I review it and I'm like, where can I put in twists and turns? Where can I put in red herrings? And so like I'll go through and I'll layer those in, and then I'll let it sit for a while. Then I'll come back to it, read through it again, and revise it. I'll typically go through like a couple of revisions just for the outline. And outlines aren't long. They're like maybe like 12 pages or something like that. Well, okay. If I'm not writing an Earthman Jack novel, at that point, like I think my current outline is like 100 pages for that. Yeah.
those are really big books. I mean, Rook and Berenger is like that thick. Earthman Jack is like that.
Yeah. The pitfalls of writing space opera. But the reason I wanted to do Rook and Berenger was because I wanted something that was like quicker and easier and a little bit more digestible. And so the story I came up with for the first Rook and Berenger book was the meeting of these two characters that are going to propel the series forward. Yep. It's the Riggs and Murtaugh, the old grizzled veteran with the young rookie. And but the young rookie is the one who's all uptight. The old grizzled veteran's the wild card. And it's basically every book kind of relies on the chemistry between these two because they're so diametrically opposed. Yeah. But when the chips are down, they are perfect together. And because they kind of make up for each other's weaknesses. And so the question is, what interesting scenarios can I put these characters into? And the first one, which is currently published, is called Childhood's End, and it's a mystery about a far-off planet in the far, far back reaches of space. And this colony finds the body of a little girl out in the wilderness, and they think it's from the colony, but when they check and take stock of all the kids there, they find out this little girl isn't a member of the colony. And so they're like, number one, who is she? How did she get here? And what killed her? Mm-hmm. And so in the book, Rook and Berenger are a member of the Galactic Rangers, which is kind of like a take on the Texas Rangers, where they have like authority to basically go anywhere within an area of space and act as like law enforcement, because you have a lot of frontier colonies that don't have a working police force or anything like that. So these guys kind of jump around as needed. And so they're sent to this planet to investigate the death of this little girl, to find out what happened to her. And then that leads them to uncover a larger conspiracy that has far-reaching effects throughout the rest of the series. Yep. And this is kind of like the introduction to all that stuff, introduction to the characters, introduction to the conspiracy, the meta-narrative that I'm going to be constructing over the course of the novels, and all that good stuff. And it's been received pretty well. I'm actually about halfway through the second book right now, which is also a lot of fun. And I've always been a big mystery guy. I love like trying to figure out mysteries, and I also like constructing mysteries for other people to figure out. And so that was basically just how I came about doing Rook and Berenger.
I'm in it for, especially with Rook and Berenger, I'm in it for the adventure. Like I'm sold these two characters, Braxton Berenger and Declan Prescott?
Just call him Rook.
Rook. Well, there's a joke in there, and this is the thing that I like about some of your writing stuff, is like you put these little hints and jokes that I feel like are so familiar. They have such a nostalgic feel. But like there's a robot character, and Wadsworth, when he gets introduced to the rookie, he says, "Just call me, Declan, just Declan." And then the robot goes, "Okay, Declan, just Declan," and he goes, rolls off and does something else. And the rookie is just sitting there like, God, yeah, it's a running joke throughout the whole book, where like this stupid robot just cannot get his name right, or he takes it very, very literally.
Well, the scene is so Declan is a very kind of young, uptight rookie. He's very by the book. And when he first meets Berenger, his new partner, Berenger just calls him Rook, short for rookie, gives him this nickname. And he's like, I'm not a rookie. My name is Declan Prescott. You will call me by my name. And so Berenger, just to dig at Declan, starts introducing him to everyone as Rook. And Wadsworth is Berenger's robot butler. He kind of keeps his ship and washes his clothes and takes care of Berenger because Berenger's a mess. And when Wadsworth first meets Declan, Berenger's like, yeah, this here's Rook. And he's like, Wadsworth, this is like, oh, hello, Sir Rook, and Declan's like, my name isn't Rook. My name is Declan, and just Declan. And then the robot trying to accommodate him is like, okay, Declan, just Declan. And then he just goes off, and Declan just gets even more frustrated that no one can get his name right.
Yeah.
So
with this book, like, it's for you guys, if you're listening and you're interested in this kind of thing. I know we had a comment from Gosso a minute ago. It said, wait a minute, Lethal Weapon meets Firefly. I'm in. It's such a great adventure. You get to go on this solving a mystery with these two characters, and there's space battles and shootouts, and then it goes down to like very classic old west dusty town shootouts. It's a ton of fun. I highly recommend it. We had a comment a minute. Go ahead.
Just wanted to say that if you guys like audiobooks, when I was making the audiobook version of Lawmen, I approached it like an audio play. And so when you listen to the audiobook, I have a great narrator, does a bunch of different voices for each character. We have music, we have sound effects. So it actually feels like you're watching a movie in your head when you're listening to it.
Yeah, it's very much like the 20th anniversary of the Thrawn trilogy. If you guys listen to that, where they have like the sounds of the spaceships and the lasers firing and stuff like that, it's all very much like that. You did all that yourself, right, Kadish? You inputted all the audio. That's amazing, dude.
I did all the sound design, all that good stuff, and I found a really good narrator who killed it.
Yeah, he did. I'm super jealous, and I kind of want to be like his little Padawan or something because he did an amazing job. So this is an interesting comment. He said, I'm assuming that this person is a writer or maybe wants to be a writer someday.
Well, I recognize Random McAnderson. He comes on the streams. Yeah.
Oh, right on. Welcome, sir. Says, I find if I outline too much, I lose sight of the character's internal motivations and growth because I have beats I want to hit too much instead of thinking of what the characters really want to do. How would you address a situation like that? Do you feel the same way, or do you work really well with that outline?
I don't feel the same way. I know that every writer has to kind of follow their own workflow. What works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another. I know lots of writers who we call them pantsers, in the sense that they write by the seat of their pants. They just make it up as they go. They sit down. They don't have an outline. They don't have any idea of where the story's going. They just start writing. And when I talk to these people, they're like, I like the process of discovery. I like the idea that I can be surprised as I'm writing. The characters can surprise me and all this other stuff. And I'm like, well, as I'm writing within my outline, within my framework, I still experience that too. Like, an outline's not set in stone. If you write something and all of a sudden something goes off in a different direction you weren't expecting, you can kind of sit back and be like, okay, how can this fit into my outline? How can I adjust my story to fit this in? Because this is good stuff. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's just a question of, having the roadmap, but not being afraid to take some back roads occasionally. So like you can give yourself the freedom to say like, okay, I've got this midpoint I want to get to, and I got this, crossing the threshold point that starts it off. But in between that, I'm just going to wing it. But I know where I'm going. I just don't know how I'm going to get there. And if you do that, you can have that process of discovery. I mean, sometimes even I do that because I'm just like, well, I don't know where to go from here.
Yeah.
So like I'll write stuff and then I'll throw it away, and then I'll write something else and I'll be like, okay, this works. But I tend to, one of the reasons my outlines are so long is because I tend to kind of break down scene by scene what happens. And that way I don't have to think too hard about what I'm going to write that day. I can just sit down and let the conversation flow and let the description come out naturally and stuff like that. And then I can check that off my outline and then move on to the next scene. So I go scene by scene when I'm going through my outline, and that just works for me.
Okay.
Like I know there are people out there who just like to be surprised as they write. Personally, I tend to find that their final stories aren't very well crafted simply because of that. But, if it works for them, more power to them.
I hear that a lot. I know I've heard guys like Quentin Tarantino say when he's writing, he's the characters kind of like take a life of their own, and they go off on their own stories, and it surprises him. As somebody who doesn't write, I'm not a creative person in that way. That is really difficult for me to grasp. Like I look at that saying, and I'm like, oh, the characters take a life of their own. I'm like, no, you're sitting in front of the desk. You are their life. You get to say what they do and what they don't do. So this whole idea of like, oh, the characters go off and do their adventure, and I'm just sitting there writing it, that does not make any logical sense to me whatsoever. So I don't understand, like, how does that mindset work? Have you ever been in a situation where you're writing, you're like, oh, this is interesting, and you're kind of surprised, or are you always stuck to that, like, no, my outline says go A, B, C?
Well, the best character writers like Tarantino tend to be actors. I have a background in acting. When I was growing up, I used to love to do theater. Did a lot of theater. The problem was I had such a bad memory, I couldn't remember my lines. I loved being up on stage and embodying characters. And when I went through film school and I studied directing, a lot of like 80% of directing is like working with actors and pulling out performances and crafting characters. So when you're writing characters, good writers tend to slip into the skins of the characters they're writing and embody them like an actor would, except instead of just playing one character, you're playing every character in your head. And so I totally understand when authors say, I let the characters take over and just do things, because, yeah, even though you're like the god who's dictating what they do, like the minutia of a scene is something that stems from the character. So like when I have a dialogue scene between two characters, I have to embody both characters and figure out, okay, I know this character is like this, so he would say this. And I know the character that he's talking to would respond this way because the character is like this. Like Rook and Berenger, when I'm writing their dialogue, I become those two characters, and I just kind of jot down what in my brain as I'm acting both characters are saying to each other. And so I know to you that doesn't make sense, but to me, it is like I'm watching a movie play out in my head and I'm just transcribing it. But at the same time, that movie that's playing out in my head is being directed by me and acted by me and, produced by me.
Yeah.
So, it's just, it comes down to having a good grasp of your characters, having a good grasp of your world, having a good grasp of what the story is and where it's going. And when you have all those elements, if you're like a natural filmmaker, a natural storyteller, a natural actor, all the elements come together in your head and you can see it, you can hear it. And as a writer, your only job is to get what you see and hear on the page.
Okay. That's interesting. So we got another comment. These comments are great, guys. Keep them coming. I love them. And also, Danny's in the chat. Welcome, everybody.
Hey,
we're going to go back a little bit. Keely Chow said, hi, everybody. Hello. What's going on? We're talking writing. We're talking nerdy stuff about workshop and how to write books. It's something that's like, for me, I know I'm not skilled in that way, but I kind of wish I was, because I do have a lot of ideas in my head of like, oh, that'd be kind of a cool story. But then that's where it ends, because I just don't have the skill set to take it to the next step. I would have to like, bring that in a little bit and kind of feed into that idea. But for me, it's just, it's
well,
the far back burner.
The good thing about writing is that it's a skill anyone can develop.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to look at Hollywood, you wouldn't think that that's true. But the fact is that a lot of people in Hollywood don't study their craft. They just do it, whether they're good at it or not. Once you pass, basic writing in grade school, you think that you can be a writer because you can put words on a page. But writing is so much more than just stringing sentences together. It is crafting realistic, believable, likable characters. It's creating a world that those characters can live in, whether it be contemporary or historical or futuristic.
Yeah.
It's about, dialogue, like realistic ways that people talk to one another. It's about creating drama and structuring a story. These are things that some people come by them naturally. I was someone who had to dive deep. And so, like, if you see some of the books behind me here, I've got an entire library downstairs of just screenwriting books, storytelling books, writers' books, and I've read all of them because I wanted to learn how to be a better writer. Mm-hmm. And the best way you can learn to be a better writer is just to write and let people read your stuff and then listen to what they have to say. I'm always someone who was never afraid of criticism, because most criticism, there's a kernel of truth in it, right? And if you're savvy enough to kind of divorce the stuff where people are like, oh, it's dumb or it's just not to their taste, versus the legitimate stuff, that's how you grow. That's why I don't think of criticism as being negative. I think of it as a way to improve, your craft.
Yeah.
So like if I'm out there criticizing The Last Jedi and I'm not saying like, oh, it sucks, even though it does. but I'm saying like it was too convoluted. It had too many story plots going on. The characters weren't consistent. There were plot logic holes, like blah, blah, blah. I'm pointing all this stuff out as a critic. That to me is valuable feedback for someone like Ryan Johnson or Kathleen Kennedy or whoever, that they can look at and be like, hey, maybe this guy has a point. And then in the future, not do that.
Yeah.
And that's what fans a lot of times don't understand, is that criticism isn't negativity unless it's just people being angry and trolling,
Yeah.
Like actual legit criticism is very positive, because otherwise you can't improve your art.
Yeah. And we, like, as content creators ourselves, when we're on the podcast, we take some pretty heavy shots at a lot of TV shows and a lot of movies. Most specifically right now, we're talking about that new Apple TV show C. And we very much did not enjoy season 1 as like we enjoyed it because it was so bad. It was so bad it was good. We loved how ridiculous it was, and we loved making fun of it. And what's interesting is we're getting feedback from people who worked on that show now as we're reviewing season 2. And I think they're pretty much in line with you. As far as we can tell right now, they're very, very thick-skinned. They have a sense of humor. And when we criticize things, they say, yes, we took a lot of liberties like with that, or yes, you guys noticed that this was a flaw. And they've pretty much said, like, yeah, there's some issues to this show. We understand. And now the season 2 has improved immensely. Like, it's so much better than season 1. So, like, there's still people out there who can do that. I know we talk about Hollywood right now, even with the James Mangold stuff and everything else. Like, we sit down and we talk about like our criticisms of these movies, and we immediately get labeled as like toxic or salty nerds or this or that. Like, oh, you're just a bunch of trolls. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just haters. But unless you're like that, it's stupid. Like, unless you're just saying that, but you sit down and you have like real criticisms. This is what I didn't like. This is why I think it didn't work. There's so much meat that you can take away from that. And I look through our comments on our YouTube channel and I find the negative ones and I think about what they're saying. Usually it's some offhanded like troll comment, but there's a couple of things in there that I actually do take note of, like, oh man, it took you guys 4 minutes to get to the show. And I keep that in my mind. I'm like, I got to speed things up when I first start the YouTube video. So there's a way that you can take criticism and kind of move on. And Gasso said this, I want to mention this real quick. I want a salty nerd short film. I do too.
Well, and, we've been talking about doing a Viking cop thing with Vader.
Yes.
I think that would be funny.
Barbarian space Viking.
Little short films of him as a Viking and a cop. I think that'd be funny.
I'd be down. It's something that I've always thought it would be kind of a lot of fun to do.
Well, Alex, what's kind of funny is, so like every Thursday, my live stream is called Bad Writing. Mm-hmm. And I try to get people on there who have a background in storytelling and writing and can intelligently talk about, bad stuff that we get from Hollywood.
That's why I'm not on it, because he needs people who can intelligently talk about bad writing.
But one of the interesting feedbacks and comments that we most often get from people who watch the streams, whether it be live or after the fact, is that they were like, I know I didn't like the movie or TV show you guys were talking about, but I could never put into words what I didn't like about it. I just knew I didn't like it. Mm-hmm. And listening to you guys makes me realize, oh, yeah, that's what turned me off about this. And that's why I didn't respond the way I should have to this, and so on and so forth. And so, like, when you understand storytelling and you understand writing, you're better able. I mean, how many times on podcasts have I looked at a movie and pointed out things that you guys just either didn't realize or couldn't put into words, and you're like, and it just comes from that different background. I spent years studying this stuff. So when you put it in a certain way where it resonates with people, where people can be like, oh, you verbalize what I felt, that's when people start to pay attention. I think with C, you have a situation there where a new showrunner came in, and this is a guy who obviously understands storytelling. And he basically looked at season 1. He's like, okay, here are all the problems. here's all the stuff we got to fix.
Yep.
And then he went about structuring a new season that did all that stuff. I've said many times how impressed I am with the turnaround, because I wanted to hate season 2. I was ready for another Terabad season that we could make fun of.
Yeah.
And we get a little bit of it, but
not
compared to
nearly
season 1, it's like night and day.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have a ton of fun talking about that show, to the point now where, like, season 1, I was not invested in the characters at all. Like, I liked it because Jason Momoa was there and they had some cool fight scenes here and there, but the story itself was kind of bonkers. And
the world building didn't make any sense.
Yeah, the world, there were so many questions that just completely went unanswered. And in season 2, like literally episode 1 of season 2, they start off by answering these questions and start off by building the world that we're occupying while we're watching this show. And it helps you just like, oh, that's why they do that. And especially with a society that's completely blind, which is what the show is kind of set around. There's so many questions we have about culture, about why people do things. And season 1 did no favors to the show at all. And season 2 with Jonathan Tropper. Tropper? Yeah, Tropper. Tropper?
Yeah.
I'm terrible with names.
Look who you're talking to, dude.
I know. He's really set the record straight for this thing.
Just remember, get to the top.
Get to the top. Okay, I'll remember that. That's easy to remember. But yeah, we have a bunch of people who are like really interested in seeing our short film with the Viking cop.
Yeah. So if you guys have ever watched Netflix's Norseman, it would be in that style, but with Vader, as a Norseman going around doing modern day cop stuff.
Hey, you got your back light is out.
Yeah. You got an open container over here, okay? I'm gonna have to chop your hand off for that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's gonna. I would love to see that.
No, I have the opening scene already in my head.
You do? Oh, tell it to me. I got to know.
I do. So Vader and a Viking elder are sitting in a cop car, right? And they're just in Viking gear, and the Viking elder is showing him pictures because he's a couple of days away from retirement. He's showing him his boat, which is one of those Viking boats. Mm-hmm. And all this stuff. And Vader's just sitting there bored. And as the guy's talking about his retirement, there's a bank robbery going on, right?
Yeah.
And when the bank robbers come out, Vader and the elder get out of their car and they start throwing axes at these guys. And you think that the elder, because he just spent all that time telling people about how he's about to retire, that he's going to die. But then, like, after they slaughter the bank robbers, it cuts to his retirement party, and they've got like a big bonfire going, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you think I would have died in my last job, but I'm really glad I didn't. Now I get to live my life." And then like lightning strikes him, he dies. And then the next scene is Vader in the police station getting a new partner, and of course it's a female SJW that he's partnered up with.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So I'm in, man. Whatever you need me to play, I'm in. I want to do it. It sounds like fun, and it sounds like something like we could definitely aim for in the future if we get to the podcast to the point where we could all do it full time like we want to. I would love to do some goofy like film stuff like that.
Yeah, Vader would never be able to memorize lines.
I don't know. I think you're not giving enough credit.
No, like we'd have to. Was it Curb Your Enthusiasm? Him, where we just give him the scenario and let him.
Yeah.
Just say whatever.
Let him riff.
Yeah, let him riff.
I'm down. This is a great question. It says, Apple TV makes the best trailer commercials for their shows. I just don't want another streaming service. Listen, it's like, what, $6 a month, I think, for Apple TV. And so far, for the podcast, we've watched Season 2, which is really, really good, especially compared to Season 1. I'm on episode 2 of Foundation, which it's holding up really well. It's a little early.
Mythic Quest.
2 seasons of Mythic Quest, which is, in my opinion, one of the best comedies out right now. Like, you go watch Mythic Quest. If you're a gamer, if you're a nerd in any way, you will love that freaking show. It's so clever, and so smart. I've heard
good things about Ted Lasso.
Okay.
Laszlo, whatever that show's called. There's another alternate history show called For All Mankind about what if the Russians beat us to the moon. There's another show from M. Night Shyamalan called Servant, and there are two seasons of that out. That show's pretty creepy. Jude and I enjoyed it. So Apple TV actually has like a lot of low key, like really good shows on it. In fact, I'd argue that their original stuff is better than anything Netflix is putting out.
I would tend to agree. I think the only thing that Netflix really has that's like a powerhouse is like Stranger Things.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that comes to mind. But they really dropped the ball with Norseman, because that is one of the best comedies out right now too, and it's phenomenal. And they dropped it after season 3. They stopped producing it, and I'm like, that. Why would you stop producing your best freaking show? So like, if you're looking for a new streaming service, or if you want to drop Netflix and go trade off to something a little cheaper, I would recommend Apple TV. I think it does have a lot of worth for the $6 a month that you're buying for.
And if you buy a new Apple device, you get it for a year for free, I think.
Yep. Let's see. I just want to address the chat real quick. I just got Apple TV for free every time I buy one of their products. There you go. Yeah. I have a new Apple phone that I just got. I upgraded mine, and so I think I still pay for it. I don't know. They might have given it for free. I don't remember. But like I said, it's only like $5. It's not that much. Let's see. Samurai Berserker is another patron of the podcast. Ted Lasso is fantastic. Such a positive and funny show. For All Mankind is really good, led by another Swedish Viking. Right on. Cool. So yeah, Apple TV's got a lot going for it, and I'm really looking forward to Foundation. Have you watched both episodes yet?
I have, yeah. I mean, we're talking about it tomorrow, so I know.
I know.
I'm in the middle of my recaps for the second episode. It's taken forever for me to recap these things. But just wanted to note that For All Mankind is the guy who was behind Battlestar Galactica and Deep Space Nine, Ronald Moore. He produced that, so it's got a little bit of a pedigree to it.
Right on. There's it's tough nowadays with like trying to figure out what streaming service you want to buy if you can't afford all of them, which is getting ridiculous now. There's like freaking 12.
Yeah, it's more expensive than cable now.
Remember
how you used to cut cable and
cut cable and get streaming services. And now every studio has their own streaming service, and they're all freaking $15.
I would say like the ones that are absolutely vital: Amazon Prime, Netflix, maybe, HBO Max, and Apple TV. You got those 4. You've got the bulk of them. If you can't afford it, I put Hulu in the mix too, simply because Only Murders in the Building. It's fantastic.
That's a great show too.
They got a lot of good true crime stuff on Hulu. And some of their original series are pretty good as well. They just don't put them out as often as they should.
Yeah, this is a funny comment because I think this all the time. Eventually, we will have stream bundling, and we'll be back to the same model we used for cable. That is 100% accurate.
Disney already does that.
I'm waiting for some company. Do they do that? Because they do it with ESPN, right?
Yeah, they package it with Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN.
Yeah, it's inevitable. I think there's going to be services out there who are like, "We'll save you $15 if you bundle with us." It's just gonna go right back to the way it was. And that really stresses me out too. Gasso says, I really hope ads don't creep back in. They already have.
Yeah. They have like the ad version, which is cheaper, and then they have the ad-free version, which is more expensive.
Yeah, I remember when Hulu did that, and I was super pissed because I was like, I'm already paying $5 a month to not have ads. And now they're like, well, if you pay $7 a month, you don't get ads. And I'm like, you sons of... And even Amazon Prime now, they do like little trailers before you start watching a show or something.
I don't mind those, though.
I think sometimes you can skip them, but it's just like...
Apple does the same thing.
Do they? Yeah, I guess they do, huh? Yeah, I can skip those. Apple lets me skip, but I do notice they
Amazon
do.
Amazon lets you skip, too.
Do they? Okay. Yeah, I'm noticing that they're starting to do these things, and we're kind of creeping back into the old ways, which is irritating me. Since we're talking about like HBO Max and streaming services and stuff, so I've never watched The Sopranos. And when I told you guys that, you guys all kind of like collectively told me to go screw myself. So I went and I started watching.
Get out of your diapers and watching them again.
I went and I started watching Sopranos, and I'm on like episode 5 or 6, and I do not like this show. And I'm like, what am I missing here? Because I've heard nothing but good things for the past freaking 20 years about this show. And I start watching it, and I'm just like, this is not fun. This is not a entertaining show. I'm just constantly annoyed with like every character.
Do you like mob movies though?
I do like some mob movies, not all of them, but I like definitely the Scorsese classics, like in Goodfellas and Casino and stuff like that. Like I love that aspect to it.
See, like if you like mob movies, you should love The Sopranos. And if you're not liking the first season, you should just stop because the first season's the best. It doesn't get better. In fact, like it takes a big dive after I think season 3. Personally, but I stuck with it to the end because I was watching it when it was airing. But it's one of those things where it's like a very specific type of person from New Jersey. Like if you know that type of person, you totally relate with the show. If you don't, it's just kind of like, I can't stand these people. I don't want to watch them. They're terrible. It's kind of the same thing with the Jersey Shore. If you like the Jersey Shore, you'll like the Sopranos.
Okay. I definitely don't. My issue with it is like, I like Tony. Tony's kind of a cool guy, and he's interesting to watch. And I like him kind of maneuvering around the mob and dealing with different people and power struggles. That element I like. What I don't like is the whole backdrop that it's set on, where he's like going to a therapist and his wife hates him and his mom is a freaking super annoying character that I hate every time she's on screen.
Well, that's
like
kind
everybody
of the core of the show.
God, I can't stand her. I just want her to die.
Well, I mean, it's about the show overall is about family.
Yeah.
And it's really about how Tony is trying to reconcile his family with his job, because he has so much stress brought on by both his job and his family that he can't enjoy either. And so the therapist is vital for him to kind of work through his issues and figure out a way to actually be happy. And, when you look at it through that lens, it's a lot more of a sophisticated show than a lot of people give it credit for. But as Gasso says, The Wire, in my opinion, is the superior show. I think that's probably one of the best shows. It's up there with Breaking Bad in terms of the best television ever made. Now, warning, it takes you about 8 episodes that you have to suffer through in order to get into it.
Okay.
So like the first season's very slow, but at a certain point, I think it's in episode 8, something happens and all the characters suddenly click for you. And all of a sudden you can't get enough of that show.
Okay.
And if you binge it back to back, all 5 seasons, it really feels like a novel put on screen, because it's a 5-act play. Every season is a different act in the story. And the first 2 seasons seem very disjointed, but by the time you get to season 5, everything makes sense.
Okay.
And unfortunately, Michael K. Williams, who played Omar in that show, passed away recently. And I actually knew that guy. I met him at the Cheesecake Factory at the Grove one day. And I walked up to him and I'm like, "You were great as Omar, man." And he was like, "Hey, thanks, man." And we started hanging out. Like I went to his apartment, like we chilled out. We talked about Michael Jackson a lot.
Huh.
He was a big Michael Jackson fan. And he was just like a super cool guy. And I was really sad to hear that he passed away, especially like at such an early age. He was a great actor.
So The Wire is it's like a police drama, correct?
It's cops and robbers. It's about Baltimore City police officers and Baltimore City drug dealers.
Okay.
And the thing that makes it unique is that they give equal weight to both sides. The cops aren't always the good guys, and the drug dealers aren't always the bad guys. And you come to care and hate different characters from each side. And when you see them interact with one another, it's confusing because you're not sure who you should like and like who you should be rooting for. And it's a very sophisticated TV show. Like I said, the first season is very slow, but that's actually deliberate because it gives you time to connect with all the characters and understand who they are and what their role is in the story. And once you know the characters, the events that begin happening throughout the show just hook you in. Okay. And it's seriously one of the best character-driven stories I think I've ever seen on TV, next to Breaking Bad.
Okay. I loved Breaking Bad. And it was funny because I stopped watching. I think I watched season 1, and about halfway through, I was kind of like, meh, it's fine. I'll pick it up another time. And then I put it down and I put it in my back burner and I started watching other things. And then it was like in the back of my head. And I was like, I got to go back and find out what the heck Walter did. And I went back to it months later, and for whatever reason, that little break that I took from it, when I went back into it, I was freaking 100% dialed into this show. Every episode clicked. I love the whole thing from start to finish. And it's one of the best show watching experiences I've ever had. So sometimes I might need to do that with Sopranos. I know I love this comment. Sopranos is overrated. It doesn't do anything better that Goodfellas or Godfather did already.
I would agree with that. I do think Sopranos is way overrated.
Okay. Yeah,
But I would also say Breaking Bad is far better paced than The Wire is. The Wire is very slow, but it's deliberately slow. It's not like they're meandering. It's that they have a plan and they're sticking to it.
Okay.
And so if you stick with it long enough, you get sucked in. And if you don't, you bail and you miss out on some of the best TV ever. So.
Okay. I'm going to check out
Sopranos. Super overrated.
I'll put Sopranos on my back burner. I'll finish it another time, and I'm going to switch over to The Wire because there's like, it's funny because we do the podcast. We watch a ton of content just so that we can talk about it on the podcast. And then like, if I have any spare time whatsoever, I usually try to put something in my watch list that's just for me that we don't have to talk about. And I can just, kind of like, I don't have to think about like, oh, how am I going to describe this? Or, I'm thinking for the podcast, what's my favorite scene? What am I going to ask my co-hosts about? Like, how am I going to direct the conversation? I like being able to just turn off my brain and just enjoy a show. So right now I tried Sopranos out. It's not really a fit. I've got Warrior on my list, which is another Jonathan Tropper. Another Jonathan Tropper show, which has really got me hooked. So there's a couple things I like to watch. But do you do the same thing? Because I know we watch, what do we watch? 5 movies for the podcast, plus 2 TV shows. Like, do you have any time during your week to like watch something that's just for you?
Yes. Because Jude and I work from home and we have no lives, we tend to burn through those movies pretty quick. Like we'll do like a movie a day, and then we'll binge like the TV shows on the same day, and that leaves us like maybe like 2 days where we're just free to watch whatever. So like tonight, for instance, like we have everything watched for tomorrow, and typically I'd be downstairs with Jude right now watching the finale of Warrior, or the end of the first episode of Warrior, because we started it last night. And then maybe the second episode. We just finished the first 5 episodes of season 3 of What We Do in the Shadows.
I'll have to watch that too.
Yeah, we watched the first couple episodes of Why the Last Man on FX, and we've been watching Only Murders in the Building on Hulu.
Yep.
So we're able to watch a lot of that stuff. We even started The Lost Symbol on Peacock, which is the Dan Brown Da Vinci Code style series based off of his book. So yeah, like we're watching a bunch of stuff that's just for fun right now. And we needed it too, because after these fucking dragon movies, I needed something good.
That's a good segue, because we're going to polish this up real quick, guys. It's been about an hour. So this week, we let the club members of the Salty Nerd podcast choose the movies that we're going to watch. We gave them a theme. We said, pick dragon movies, pick any movie that has to do with the dragon, that has dragons in it, that are a main element of the show. And they picked, I think I learned something about our patrons. They love to torture us, because one of these movies, for me personally, one of these movies is just hot garbage.
I think I know which one it is.
I cannot wait to rip it apart with you guys tomorrow. The other 2, I have differing opinions, I think, than the rest of you guys. There's some nostalgia going on there, so I might be a little bit biased, but it's a ton of fun. If you guys want to jump in, if you're not already, I know we have a couple club members in the chat right now, Gasso and Samurai Berserker. Thank you guys very much. I hope you are loving the content. I hope you're loving the Discord access. But if you're not a club member and you love what we do here, if you love watching Matthew Kadish's bad writing streams, or if you love watching the Home Gang on Saturdays, or if you just like watching our normal stuff, we're offering a ton of extra content for our club members. We're doing 4 episodes a month. That's specifically just for them. And speaking of Apple TV, the new show Foundation, we're going to do the first episode publicly to get that out there, to let people know that we're reviewing it. And then after that, the rest of the season is going to be club members only. So jump in. It's only $5 a month. It helps us out a ton, and you guys get a huge amount of content in return. And we're really pushing.
Let me tell you, the first episode of Foundation, there's so much stuff set up in that episode.
Yeah.
Because like we're going to be coming at it not only as viewers of the show, but also as, at least Jude and I are well aware of what happens in the books. So we're going to be able to compare and contrast. But check out that first episode that we dropped for our Foundation review. It should be next Monday. And it is going to be very insightful. You're not going to be able to watch the show the same way that most people watch it after you listen to us.
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it because I've never read the books. I've done a little tiny bit of research just to kind of get like a backdrop and understand where the source material is coming from. But I'm really looking forward to getting Jude's knowledge of the books and mix it in with what's happening in the show. And there's a comment. The second episode already jumped the shark. Are you talking about Foundation? Random? Because
I don't agree with that.
That's interesting. That is very interesting. I think this is going to be a hot button show. A lot of people are going to disagree on it.
Random, you're going to want to see my take on episode 2 because as a writer, I see a lot of what they're doing, and I'm going to reveal it when we talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He's talking about Foundation. Ooh, fascinating. Yes, guys. SaltyNerdClub.com. Join the club. It's $5 a month. There's a huge amount of content that you're going to get access to, along with the community on Discord. All of our club members are in there chatting it up. We're talking about all these TV shows. So
we do 4 patron-specific episodes every month, but we also do Q&A sessions. We do fun stuff like we just did Dad Joke Challenge, which patrons got early access to. But it was so funny. We were like, we got to show this to the public. So like normally that would be a patron-only thing.
Yeah.
But we also have our weekly outtakes videos, the stuff that didn't make it into the final edit of our show. And we also love corresponding with our patrons. So like if you guys leave comments, we respond to them. If you guys send us a message through Patreon, we always respond to it. Yep. And of course we have our Discord, rooms for patrons only. And we love interacting with people on there. In fact, I think we had one guy sign up just because he's like, all these other content creators don't respond to me when I'm in their Discords, but you guys do. So,
yeah. For you guys who don't know me, I used to be a huge fan of other podcasts. I would consume so much content from other people. And every time I'd reach out to them, they just would be too busy or they wouldn't respond, or I just would never get a response back from them. So as like a consumer of podcasts and as a consumer of YouTube channels and stuff like that, I know what it feels like to like reach out to somebody and have nobody respond to you. It's very aggravating, and it also kind of makes you feel like you don't care. So I make an absolute point that I have my notifications on for our Discord chat. If somebody tags me or if I see a conversation going, I jump in there. I say, hey guys, what's up? I, at the very minimum, will go in there and say, hey, this conversation's awesome. I read through the whole thing. You guys are having a great time in here. It's awesome. I love seeing it. But I always welcome newcomers. If I see somebody pop into the Discord chat, I'm like, hey, welcome. I make sure everybody else knows they're there. And I love doing it. I love interacting with our club members. It's awesome time. And it's my favorite app. I've moved away from Twitter. Twitter was toxic for me. And I'm not saying that as like some weird SJW thing. I literally would flip through Twitter for like 5 minutes and it would put me in a weird mindset and I'd get pissed the rest of the day. So I gave that to Vader. He likes being pissed off at dumb people. So I gave that to Vader. He controls the Twitter account now, and I'm exclusively on either Instagram or Discord, and that's kind of where I live, and that's where I hang out with our club members, and we have a ton of fun talking. So Twitter is internet cancer. Indeed, sir. But yeah, that's it, guys. That's our live stream for tonight. Matthew Kadish, thank you so much for...
real quick, this Thursday, we're going to be doing the Bad Writing live stream at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to have a really interesting panel. Mr. Reagan's coming back.
Oh, nice.
And we've also got Sean Collette, who's a local film professor here in Las Vegas at the Las Vegas College down here, and one other special guest. And we're going to be talking this week about J.J. Abrams' mystery box concept. We're going to be tearing into that and telling you all why it doesn't work. So... be sure to tune in and join us in the chat. And don't forget to throw in those super chats because we like money. So.
Yeah, of course. Twitter kind of worked out for you guys. It did. It does have its place. I will say that. And that's why I didn't completely delete the channel. I just gave it to Vader because he's way better at working that than I am. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And real quick, as an ending recap to this, Matthew Kadish, what would you tell people who are inspiring writers? What's the first step to getting into the game?
Finishing what you start. If you want to be a writer, write. If you want to be a professional writer, finish what you write. I know lots of people who just start writing and they never finish the story. I'm guilty of that too. I start a lot of stuff that I never finish. But if you want to create neat stuff that people can actually consume and enjoy. If you start something, finish it. That's the best thing I can tell writers to do.
Right on.
Even if it's bad. The worst thing you can do is just write something, give up. Even if it's bad, get it on the page, because you can go back and make it better. Like, I always hate the first thing I write, but when I go back and I start rewriting it, I start sculpting it and refining it, eventually it gets, dare I say it, good.
Nice.
So don't be afraid to write bad. Just know that that's the worst it's going to be before you publish it. At least I hope so. Take your writing seriously.
Right on. All right, guys, go to kadishbooks.com and pick up Matthew Kadish's books. Yeah. I personally recommend Rick and Berenger.
Yeah, go to Audible, look up Lawman, or just type in my name, and Lawman will come up. I'm really proud of that audiobook. So.
It came out really good, guys. Seriously, it's like an experience when you're listening to it. It's amazing. I know I sound kind of shilly, but I'm serious. It's really freaking good.
Trust me. If Alex did not like my writing, he would let me and everyone else know it. He'd be like, I don't want to talk about Kadish's writing, man, because it's not very good.
Yeah. I don't know. I have too much integrity, or I don't know what there is. I'm brutally honest. But yeah, I've read Rook and Berenger multiple times. I've listened to the audiobook. It's amazing. It's a ton of fun. It's very much like that Firefly space cowboy thing going on. So I definitely check it out. All right, guys, that's it. That's the recording for tonight. Thank you guys so much for joining us. A Case of the Mondays. We will be back next Monday, and we'll figure out what we're going to talk about. I don't have a guest lined up yet, but if we don't, we'll probably have Matthew Kadish, or maybe we'll get Vader on here, and we'll do like a Q&A session for the Salty Nerd podcast. But hopefully I will be able to nail down a guest. I have a couple lined up for October. Some fun people, some interesting people that we'll be able to talk with. So thank you guys very much. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will catch you guys next week. Stay salty, my friends.